Welcome to today's episode of Heard and Seen Around. I am Rajesh Karipurath. This is my take on macroeconomic and geoeconomic data points, which I find interesting. I hope you enjoy watching it as much as I enjoyed curating it. Cheers.
Taxpayer, one who doesn't have to pass a civil service exam to work for the government. Chef, any cook who swears in French. Living up to ideals is like doing everyday work with your Sunday clothes on. Farming looks easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield. 99% of the work of the professional bodyguard consisted of one activity, frowning.
Energy markets are flashing a very uneven war tax. European natural gas prices have shot up dramatically, while US gasoline prices are moving up, but nowhere near the same panic levels. Why? Geography and infrastructure. America sits on abundant domestic energy, while Europe depends heavily on imports and fragile supply chains. When conflict hits the pipes and shipping lanes, Europe feels it first, and the hardest. For markets, this means higher inflation risk in Europe, pressure on industry, and potentially tighter monetary policy, just when growth is already wobbling. In short, the same war, very different energy bill. Around the world, central banks are quietly entering their easing era. Poland just delivered its 7th rate cut in a year, trimming policy raised to 3.75%. Inflation is cooling across many economies, and real rates in several countries remain comfortably positive, meaning policymakers finally have room to step off the brake. But the global picture isn't uniform. A few holdouts are still hiking, while emerging markets like Brazil and Mexico are sitting on towering interest rates. Translation for markets, liquidity is slowly returning, but it's arriving country by country, not as a synchronized global wave. History suggests oil markets don't panic all at once. They simmer first. After major geopolitical shocks like the Russia-Ukraine invasion, Gulf Wars, or the Arab Spring, oil prices typically climb gradually over weeks, often rising 20 to 30% within 2 months as real supply disruptions appear. The market's first reaction is usually fear. The real rally comes later, when tankers reroute, inventories tighten, and traders realize barrels are actually missing. In other words, the headline moves fast, but the physical oil market moves slower. And that's when the prices tend to really wake up. As Thomas Sowell said, the cure for high prices is high prices. Here's a staggering reality of globalization. The world trades at about $30 plus trillion in goods, but roughly $13 trillion gets spent just moving those goods around. Freight, storage, fuel, insurance, the whole logistical circus. In fact, transportation alone eats up nearly 2/3 of total logistical costs. That's why governments are racing to build economic corridors, mega networks of ports, rail, highways, and pipelines designed to move goods faster and cheaper. Think of them as global expressways for commerce. Build the road, the industries, warehouses, and cities start clustering around it. Something extraordinary is happening in capital markets. Big tech's AI investment boom is now running at nearly 8 times the pace of the dot-com era, making it one of the largest technology spending waves in modern history. The scale is staggering. AI Capex from major tech firms rivals the combined defense budgets of several major economies and is approaching the size of total US bank credit growth. In other words, a handful of tech companies are deploying capital at levels that look more like government programs than corporate budgets. Here's the uncomfortable math. India imports about 85% of its oil, and so when crude climbs, the balance of payments feels it immediately. In the last big oil spike around 2011 to 2013, the oil trade deficit ballooned to over 5% of GDP, the current account gap hit nearly 4.8%, and the rupee slid sharply. Even today, if crude averages $120 a barrel, India's oil deficit could reach 5.4% of GDP, pushing the current account deficit towards 3%. Not a crisis, but enough to put pressure on the rupee and stir market volatility.